I was working as an attorney at one of San Diego's largest law firms when I first met Sarah. She was a young 20-something woman who was beautiful and intelligent, and she had been trafficked when she was just 16 years old by her boyfriend, Darren. It's not what you're thinking. He didn't kidnap her and hold her against her will. No, it was much more nuanced than that. Darren used his charisma and his charm to get Sarah to fall in love with him. And after a few months, he asked her if she could help him make some extra money. By this time, she was madly in love with Darren, and she wanted to do whatever she could to help out. He told her he wanted her to go on dates with men. Now, as a naive 16-year-old girl, Sarah didn't understand at the time that those men that she went on dates with would expect to have sex with her. If she refused, Darren would beat her into submission. He took every penny she earned, and he demanded that she had a $1,000 a day quota. If she didn't meet it, she wouldn't be allowed to eat or sleep. This went on for quite a while, and Sarah felt trapped. She didn't know how to get away from him. Every time she tried to leave him, Darren would threaten to harm her family. Until one day, she had a date with a man at a hotel. They agreed on a price, and then immediately he identified himself as an undercover cop. At first, Sarah thought, finally, someone's gonna help me escape from Darren. But that's not what happened. The cop arrested her for crimes that Darren had forced her to commit. Now, there's a lot of misinformation out there about human trafficking, so let's just make sure we understand what we're talking about. Human trafficking is the exploitation of another person by means of force, fraud, or coercion for purposes of commercial sex or labor. Human trafficking is also exploiting a child for sex. In that case, there doesn't need to be force, fraud, or coercion because a child can't consent to be sold for sex. Now, what you don't hear anywhere in this definition is crossing a border. Human trafficking doesn't involve crossing a border at all. You can be trafficked in a single city and never leave. If you illegally bring somebody across an international border, that's called human smuggling, which is a completely different crime. Now, no one is immune from human trafficking. It impacts boys, girls, men, and women. All races, all nationalities can be trafficked, but there are some groups that are more vulnerable to being trafficked. For example, foster kids, victims of poverty and abuse, LGBTQ individuals. And what most people don't know about human trafficking is that when law enforcement shows up on the scene of a crime where human trafficking has been committed, they think that law enforcement helps the victim and arrests the perpetrator. But unfortunately, that is not the experience of most human trafficking survivors. A study by the National Survivor Network found that 91% of survivors surveyed had been arrested at least once. Over half had been arrested for the first time as a child, and over 40% had been arrested more than 9 times. Having an arrest or a criminal record of any kind is devastating for anyone. It's hard to get a job, it's hard to get a place to live, student loans, or public benefits. For a human trafficking survivor, having a criminal record traps them into a life of abuse, exploitation, and poverty. I know it sounds cliche, but I went to law school to help people. When I started law school, I didn't know exactly how I was going to help people, but I assumed I would figure it out along the way. When I graduated from law school, I was fortunate to get a clerkship working for a federal judge in San Diego. And that clerkship opened up the door for me to work at a big law firm in San Diego. While I knew I wanted to help people as a lawyer, I also knew that I had student loans. So I figured I'd work at this big law firm, I'd pay off my student loans, get some great legal experience, and I could volunteer in order to fulfill my desire to help people. When I first learned about human trafficking, I was appalled at how prevalent it was in our community. I asked one simple question: what can I do to help? And the answer I got over and over again was, we need lawyers. We need lawyers to help survivors. So I founded the Lawyers Club of San Diego Human Trafficking Collaborative to engage the legal community in the fight against human trafficking. It was around this time that I first met Sarah. She was a bright and bubbly young woman, and she was so resilient. Meeting Sarah changed my life. She never let anything come in the way of her achieving her dreams. And with all she had overcome and all she had done to move past her exploitation, she still had these criminal issues hanging over her head. Survivors like Sarah, they need a fresh start and they need a clean criminal record. At that time, there was a number of states that had laws that helped survivors clean up their records called Vacatur laws. Unfortunately, California didn't have a Vacatur law. So I worked with Lawyers Club of San Diego to advocate for a Vacatur law in California. And when we passed that law, Sarah was my very first Vacatur client. I knew that there were so many other survivors out there like Sarah who needed help cleaning up their records. And that's when I knew exactly what I was supposed to do with my law degree. And it was around that time that I decided to quit my job at the law firm and start a nonprofit called Free to Thrive to help human trafficking survivors with their legal needs. When I started Free to Thrive, we had 1 year of funding, and I was the only employee. But I quit my job with a hope and a prayer. And after almost 4 years, we have 12 employees, and we've helped almost 200 human trafficking survivors. People often ask me, why would you quit a lucrative law firm job to go start a nonprofit? The honest answer is, there was never a thought in my mind not to. So you may be wondering, whatever happened to Sarah? Well, Sarah got her GED while she was in the residential program when we first met. And then she went off to college, where she got straight A's and was on the Dean's Honor Roll. And with the help of Free to Thrive, Sarah became one of the first human trafficking survivors in the state of California to clear their record using California's Vacatur law. Now, with this new law, we can help survivors clean up their records after the fact. But there's so many survivors who are serving time in prison who are just like Sarah. So now we're advocating for a new law to help survivors out of prison. This law would allow judges to reduce sentences for human trafficking survivors. And when we pass it, we're going to help survivors get out of prison. But even this new law doesn't go far enough. We have to change the paradigm. We have to stop criminalizing human trafficking survivors. And in this moment of reckoning over the racial inequality in our society, we have to acknowledge that survivors of color are criminalized at higher rates than white survivors. Therefore, we need to educate our judges, law enforcement, and prosecutors about the racial inequalities in our criminal justice system and work to address them. I started this work with one question: what can I do to help? And asking that question, I found my purpose and my passion. So what can you do to help? Well, you can help raise awareness simply by sharing this talk. Knowledge is power. If you're a parent, I hope you'll take the time to talk to your kids about internet safety and protect them and their friends from human traffickers. Anyone can help by getting involved in a nonprofit anywhere that helps human trafficking survivors. We all have a part to play in the fight against human trafficking, and I hope you'll join me. Thank you.